He believed the badge on his chest made him untouchable, like the road itself belonged to him. Deputy Halvor Krell had spent 2 decades patrolling the cracked asphalt of Redwater County, long enough to convince himself that authority wasn't something granted by the law, but something he owned outright. In his mind, he wasn't just a cop. He was a filter between his town and everything he didn't trust. Outsiders, especially the kind who rolled through in expensive vehicles, triggered something ugly in him. It wasn't just suspicion. It was resentment sharpened into instinct. That afternoon, the heat lay heavy over Redwater like a suffocating blanket. The kind of sticky, oppressive air that made tempers short and patience non-existent. Krell sat in his cruiser tucked behind a faded billboard advertising some ambulance-chasing law firm. His uniform clung to his body, damp with sweat, while a half-melted cup of sweet tea rested in the holder beside him. The radio crackled occasionally, but mostly there was nothing, and that was the problem. A bored man like Halvor Krell didn't relax. He hunted. His eyes scanned the road lazily until something caught his attention. A sleek obsidian SUV glided into view, its polished surface reflecting the sun like liquid metal. It wasn't speeding. In fact, it was doing everything right. Steady pace, clean lane discipline, turned signal use properly. But to Krell, that wasn't reassuring. It was suspicious. People who drove perfectly were hiding something. At least, that's what he told himself. As the vehicle passed his hiding spot, he leaned forward, squinting through the glare. Through the tinted glass, he made out 2 figures. A man behind the wheel, composed, confident, and beside him, a woman scrolling through something on her phone. Then the detail that flipped the switch in Krell's brain, their skin. Dark. Instantly, his assumptions filled in the blanks. Expensive car, unfamiliar faces, not from around here. His mind snapped to a conclusion, so fast it felt like reflex. Dirty money. He didn't run the plates. He didn't wait for a violation. He didn't need evidence. Because in his world, instinct outrank procedure. Krell slammed the gear into drive, tires crunching against gravel as he lurched onto the road. His hand grabbed the radio lazily. Unit 3 Delta. Following suspicious vehicle. Possible narcotics involvement. No one questioned him. They never did. The red and blue lights flickered on silently as he accelerated, closing the distance until he was riding the SUV's bumper. He wanted to rattle them, to provoke something, fear, panic, anything he could justify escalating. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Give me a reason." But the SUV didn't react the way he expected. No sudden movements. No attempt to flee. Just calm, controlled behavior. The driver signaled, slowed, and pulled over onto the dusty shoulder near an abandoned church. That calmness irritated Krell more than anything else. It felt like defiance. He stepped out of his cruiser, adjusting his belt, his hand resting casually near his holster. The heat hit him immediately, but he ignored it, focusing instead on performance he was about to deliver. Krell always treated stops like a stage. Control the tone, dominate the interaction, keep the other side off balance. That was his method. Instead of approaching the driver's side, he moved to the passenger window. It was a trick he liked, forcing people to twist and reposition themselves. It made them uncomfortable. It gave him the psychological edge. He knocked hard on the glass, 3 sharp, aggressive strikes. The window slid down smoothly, releasing a wave of cool air that felt almost insulting against the heat outside. Inside, everything looked pristine. Clean leather, no clutter, no smell of anything illegal. Just order. That annoyed him. The woman turned toward him first. Her expression wasn't frightened. It wasn't even concerned. It was irritated, like he had interrupted something more important than him. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm, controlled. Krell didn't answer her question. He never did. Questions implied equality, and he didn't deal in that. "License and registration," he barked, leaning closer, invading their space deliberately. His eyes shifted to the driver. The man behind the wheel was solid. Broad shoulders, steady posture, the kind of presence that didn't shrink under pressure. He met Krell's stare without hesitation. That lack of fear triggered something deeper in Krell, something volatile. "I asked you a question," Krell said, his voice dropping into something colder. "You know why I pulled you over?" "We were within the speed limit." The driver replied evenly. "Signal was used. Vehicles registered. So no, I don't." Krell smirked slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Obstructed view," he said flatly. "Something hanging from your mirror." "There's nothing there," the driver replied without raising his voice. The lie hung in the air, obvious and deliberate, but Krell didn't care. Truth wasn't the point. Control was. "Don't get clever," Krell snapped, the edge in his voice sharpening. "I said license and registration." The woman exhaled slowly, clearly trying to keep the situation contained. "Just give it to him," she said quietly to the driver. "Let's move on." The driver nodded and began to move his hand toward the center console. "Hands!" Krell shouted suddenly, jerking backward as if threatened. His hand snapped to his weapon, posture instantly aggressive. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm getting my wallet," the driver said, freezing mid-motion. "You asked for her. I don't know what you're reaching for." Krell cut him off loudly, his voice now amplified for the benefit of his dash cam. "Step out of the vehicle. Both of you. Now." The tension shifted instantly. The calm inside the car hardened into something colder, more deliberate. The woman's tone changed first. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We are complying." "Out of the vehicle," Krell repeated, louder this time, "or I will remove you myself." For a brief moment, the two occupants exchanged a glance, silent, calculated. Not fear, not confusion. Something else entirely. A decision. "All right," the driver said finally, "we're stepping out." As they opened their doors and stepped onto gravel, the heat wrapped around them instantly, but neither of them reacted. They stood straight, composed, hands visible. Krell stepped back, adrenaline already building in his system. He could feel it, the situation bending in his favor. Or at least, that's what he believed. "Hands on the hood," he ordered. The driver complied first, placing his hands against the sun-heated metal. The woman followed, her movements controlled, deliberate. "Spread your feet," Krell added, circling behind them. His tone carried authority, but beneath it was something more unstable, anticipation. "Are we being detained?" the driver asked. "You're being investigated," Krell snapped. "Now do what you're told." He moved in closer, beginning a pat-down that was less about procedure and more about dominance. Rough, intrusive, searching not just for weapons but for validation of assumptions. Anything that would justify what he had already decided was true. And as his hands moved, as the silence stretched between them, one thing became increasingly clear. This wasn't going the way he thought it would. But however, Krell didn't realize it yet. Not even close. The gravel crunched under Halvor Krell's boots as he circled behind the man at the hood, his breath heavy, uneven. Not from the heat, but from the anticipation building inside him. This was the part he enjoyed most. The moment where control shifted completely into his hands. Where the badge wasn't just authority, it was leverage. He shoved the driver's legs wider with the side of his boot, unnecessarily rough. The man didn't react beyond adjusting his balance. That restraint irritated Krell more than outright defiance ever could. He wanted resistance. He wanted something he could escalate. Instead, he got composure. Krell began to pat down, his hands moving aggressively across the man's sides, waistband, down the legs. It was less a search and more an assertion of dominance. He pressed harder than necessary, lingering where he didn't need to, as if trying to provoke a reaction. Nothing. Then his hand brushed against something firm in the back pocket. There it was. Krell's pulse spiked. "What's this?" he demanded, already convinced he'd found what he was looking for. "That would be my wallet," the man replied calmly, his voice steady despite the situation. "The same one you asked me to retrieve." Krell yanked it out roughly, not even opening it yet. He tossed it onto the hood, like it was evidence already sealed in his favor. He didn't need confirmation. He already believed his narrative. He turned to the woman. "Your turn." She straightened slightly, but didn't move her hands from the hood. "I did not consent to a search," she said firmly. That stopped him for a fraction of a second. Not the words, but the tone. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even protest. It was certainty. "I don't need your consent." Krell shot back, irritation flaring. "You're acting suspicious." "Suspicion is not probable cause," she replied, her voice sharper now. "You're violating procedure." Krell stepped closer, lowering his voice into something more personal, more threatening. "You're not in a courtroom," he muttered near her ear. "Out here, I decide what procedure looks like." He grabbed her arm and turned her around with unnecessary force. She didn't resist physically, but her eyes locked onto his with focus that made him hesitate. Just for a moment, then he pushed through it. His hands moved quickly over her sides, her jacket, her waist. He found nothing. No weapon, no contraband. Just a solid confirmation that his assumptions were still unproven. That didn't stop him. "Stay where you are," he snapped, stepping back. "Don't move." Without waiting for a response, Krell turned toward the SUV. His next move was already decided long before he reached the door. He pulled it open and leaned inside. "You cannot search that vehicle without a warrant," the woman called out behind him. "I have probable cause." Krell fired back instantly. "I smell narcotics." The lie came easy. Too easy. "You're lying," the driver said. Krell ignored him. Inside the vehicle, everything was clean. Too clean. The center console held nothing but small personal items, charging cables, sunglasses, a few receipts. The glove compartment revealed registration papers and a rental agreement. Rental. Krell's mind latched onto it immediately. "Of course," he muttered under his breath. "Not even your car." To him, it confirmed everything. He leaned further in, reaching under the driver's seat, and then his fingers brushed something cold. Metal. His heart slammed against his ribs. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled it out. A handgun. Black matte finish. Solid. Real. For a split second, everything in his mind aligned perfectly. This was it. This was the justification. The moment that would validate everything he'd done so far. He backed out of the vehicle quickly, raising the weapon high. "Gun!" Krell shouted. "Gun! On the ground! Both of you, now!" In one fluid motion, he drew his own weapon, aiming it directly at the driver's chest. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with adrenaline surging out of control. "Down!" he yelled again. Face down. But the driver didn't drop. Instead, he turned slowly, deliberately, stepping away from the hood. His expression had changed, not into panic, but into something far more dangerous. "Control. Officer," he said, voice low and measured. "Lower your weapon. That firearm is legal." "On the ground," Krell shouted, his voice cracking slightly under pressure. "It's registered." The man continued, ignoring the command. "You're escalating a situation you don't understand." "Shut up," Krell barked. "You're under arrest for illegal possession of a concealed weapon." "It's not illegal," the woman interjected sharply. "Check the wallet, the one you threw aside." Krell's grip tightened on his weapon. "I don't need to check anything," he snapped. "I know what I found." But even as he said it, something gnawed at the edge of his certainty. The man's calm hadn't broken. Not once. And the woman, she wasn't scared. She was watching him, studying him, like she was documenting everything. Krell reached for his radio, pressing the button hard enough to make it crackle. "Dispatch! This is 3 Delta," he said, forcing authority into his voice. "I need backup. 2 suspects, armed, possible trafficking." The response came quickly, voices overlapping in urgency. Units were on the way. Good. That meant witnesses. Reinforcement. Validation. Sirens began to echo faintly in the distance. Krell felt the balance shift back in his favor. Or at least, that's what he told himself. "Last chance," he warned, aiming the gun more steadily now. "On the ground." The man didn't move. Instead, he spoke again, calm, deliberate, cutting through the noise. "You are making a mistake that will end your career." Krell scoffed, but it came out thinner than he intended. "Yeah," he said, "you and every other guy I've arrested." "Look at the holster," the man said. Krell blinked. "What?" "The holster," the man repeated. "You pulled the weapon, but not what was attached to." For the first time, Krell glanced down. The gun in his hand wasn't loose. There was something clipped to it, a small leather badge holder. His stomach tightened. Sirens were getting closer now, louder, sharper. The moment stretched, and for the first time since the stop began, doubt crept in, just a crack. But it was enough, and it was already too late. The sound of sirens tore through the heavy afternoon air, growing louder with every passing second. Halvor Krell stood frozen for just a fraction too long, his eyes flicking between the firearm in his hand and the leather badge holder clipped beneath it. That tiny detail, something he'd missed in his rush, now sat like a live wire in his mind. But instead of stepping back, instead of reassessing, Krell did what men like him always did when reality threatened their control. He doubled down. "Get on the ground," he shouted again, louder this time, as if volume could drown out uncertainty. His grip on his weapon tightened, knuckles whitening. "Both of you. Now!" The man didn't move. Instead, he slowly turned his head, glancing toward the approaching sirens. Then back at Krell. There was no fear in his eyes. No panic. Just calculation. "You still have time to fix this," he said calmly. Krell laughed, but it came out strained. "Fix what? I've got you dead to rights." The woman exhaled slowly, as if she had reached the end of her patience. "You really don't understand what you've just done, do you?" "I understand exactly what I did," Krell snapped. "I pulled over 2 suspects in possession of a firearm. Then open the wallet," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. "Right now." Krell hesitated, only for a second, but it was enough to betray him. The sirens were no longer distant. They were right there. 2 patrol cars came flying down the road, tires screeching as they pulled in behind Krell's cruiser. Dust exploded into the air as doors slammed open and boots hit the ground. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" One of the officers shouted instinctively, though the scene was already locked in a tense stalemate. Officer Darnell Sykes moved first, younger, sharper-eyed than Krell, but clearly unsure what he had just walked into. Behind him, Rookie Deputy Linwood Pike hovered, his posture stiff, eyes darting between Krell and the suspects. "Cuff them!" Krell barked immediately, seizing control of the narrative before anyone could question it. Resisting detention. Illegal firearm. Sykes paused, glancing at the man standing calmly in front of Krell's drawn weapon. Something about the scene didn't sit right. "Halvor, what's going on?" he asked cautiously. "They're armed," Krell snapped. "Don't think, just cuff them." That hesitation, small but noticeable, irritated Krell more than anything else. "Do it," he shouted. Sykes swallowed, then stepped forward toward the man. "Sir, turn around." "I am a federal officer," the man said clearly, his voice carrying over the noise, deliberate and controlled. "My identification is in the wallet on the hood. If you place those cuffs on me, you are committing a federal offense." The words hit the air like a thunderclap. Sykes froze. "What?" Pike muttered under his breath. Krell snapped immediately. "He's lying. They all say that. It's a trick." "Check the wallet," the woman added, her gaze locking onto Sykes now. "You still have a chance to not be part of this." For a brief moment, the entire scene hung in suspension. 2 versions of reality, and 1 decision. Krell stepped forward, his voice dropping into something more dangerous. "You hesitate again," he said to Sykes, "and I'll write you up for insubordination so fast you won't know what hit you." "That did it." Sykes clenched his jaw and grabbed the man's arm, pulling it behind his back. The man didn't resist, but it wasn't compliance. It was something else. Control. Click. The handcuffs locked into place. A sound that echoed far louder than it should have. "Ma'am." "Turn around," Pike said nervously to the woman. She complied without argument, her eyes never leaving Krell as the cuffs tightened around her wrists. There was something unsettling in that stare. Not anger, not fear, recognition, like she had already seen how this would end. Sykes leaned closer to Krell, his voice low. "You sure about this?" "Positive," Krell snapped. "Now get them in the car." But even as he said it, the doubt was growing louder. The badge, the calm, the absolute lack of panic. It didn't add up, still gripping the confiscated firearm. Krell turned back toward the hood of the SUV. The wallet sat there exactly where he had thrown it. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, almost reluctantly, he picked it up. The leather was heavier than he expected. He flipped it open, and everything stopped. The world didn't explode. There was no dramatic sound, no sudden shift in lighting, just silence. Because inside that wallet was not a driver's license. It was a badge, gold, detailed, official in a way that no fake ever truly was. And beneath it, an identification card. The name stared back at him. Director-level clearance. Federal jurisdiction. Krell blinked once. Then again, his brain struggled to process what his eyes were clearly telling him. "No!" he muttered under his breath. Behind him, Sykes shifted uneasily. "What is it?" Krell didn't answer. Instead, he turned abruptly, scanning the vehicle again. His movements were faster now, sharper, almost frantic. He rushed back to the SUV, yanked the passenger door open, and grabbed the woman's bag. He dumped it onto the seat, hands digging through its contents until, there, another badge, another ID, different department, same level of authority. Krell's throat went dry. Slowly, almost mechanically, he turned back toward the road. The man, still in cuffs, was watching him, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, but with something far worse. Pity. And that was the moment it hit. Not like a punch, not like an explosion, but like a slow, crushing weight settling onto his chest. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had detonated his entire career. Maybe more. Sykes took a step closer. Halver? Krell swallowed hard, his voice barely holding together. "Put them in the car," he said. Sykes blinked. "What?" "Put them in the car." Krell snapped suddenly, louder, harsher. Desperation bleeding through the command. Because admitting the truth now, out here, in front of them, that wasn't something Halver Krell was capable of. Not yet. And that decision, the refusal to stop to correct course, would cost him far more than he could possibly imagine. Because this was only the beginning. He looked like the problem. "Uncuff them," Dre said quietly. "No." Krell snapped instantly, panic breaking through. "No, you can't." "Krell," Dre said, sharper now. That wasn't suggestion. For a second, Krell considered pushing back, doubling down again. But something in Dre's expression stopped him cold. Not anger, not frustration. Finality. Sykes stepped forward, hands shaking slightly as he reached for the cuffs. Click. The sound echoed again. But this time, it didn't signal control. It signaled the end of it. Adrian rolled his wrist slowly, stepping forward as if the room now belonged to him. Because it did. He reached into the property bin, retrieving his phone. "I'm making a call," he said. Dre nodded once. "Do it." Adrian dialed, put on speaker. The line rang once, twice, then connected. "Office of Federal Operations." A voice answered. "This is Special Agent Adrian Vale," he said. "Code Black, Redwater County." The reaction on the other end was instant. "Status compromised," Adrian replied. "Local interference. Illegal detention. We need full deployment." A pause. Then, "Units are already in position." Adrian glanced at Krell. "Good," he said, because at that exact moment, outside the station, the low thunder of incoming vehicles began to roll in. Not distant, not approaching, arriving. And inside the station, Halver Krell finally understood something he had refused to accept since the very beginning. This wasn't his scene anymore. This wasn't his narrative. This wasn't even his fight. And whatever came through those doors next, it wasn't backup. It was the end. The ride to Redwater County Station was short, barely 10 minutes. But inside the patrol car, it stretched into something suffocating. The air was stale, the kind that clung to the back of your throat, thick with tension and unspoken realization. Darnell Sykes kept one hand on the wheel and the other hovering near the radio, his eyes flicking constantly to the rear-view mirror. In the back seat, the man sat cramped against a divider, wrist cupped behind him, posture still controlled despite the awkward angle. Beside him, the woman stared out the window, her expression unreadable. as if she had already moved past a moment and was cataloging what came next. Sykes swallowed hard. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, barely audible. It will, the man replied calmly from back. In about 5 minutes, when you decide whether you want to be part of this or not. Don't talk, Sykes snapped, but the command lacked weight. It sounded more like fear trying to dress up as authority. You should be listening, the woman added, her tone quieter but sharper. Every decision from here forward has consequences. Up ahead, Halvor Krell's cruiser cut through the empty road. Sirens off now, lights still flashing silently. He had pushed ahead of the others, desperate to control the narrative before the truth could catch up to him. His mind was racing, replaying the badge, the ID, the calm in their voices. It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. Because if it did, everything unraveled. By the time they reached the station, Krell was already out of his vehicle, pacing near the entrance like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. The moment the patrol car rolled into the lot, he snapped back into motion, forcing confidence into his posture. The rear door opened, and the 2 detainees stepped out, still composed despite the cuffs. That composure followed them inside, cutting through the stale air of the station like something out of place. Sergeant Ivo Rennick stood behind the desk, reading glasses low on his nose, a half-finished cup of coffee beside him. He looked up slowly, taking in the scene, the cuffs, the tension, Krell's rigid posture. What did you bring me, Krell? Rennick asked, his tone neutral but edged with suspicion. High-level suspects, Krell said quickly, his voice louder than necessary. Possible trafficking, illegal firearm, fake federal credentials. Rennick raised an eyebrow. Fake, huh? Very convincing ones, Krell added, pushing the narrative harder. Professional grade. Behind him, the man finally spoke again. Or real. The room shifted. Rennick's eyes moved from Krell to the detainee. There was something in the man's tone, something that didn't match the situation. What's your name? Rennick asked. Adrian Vale. The man replied, Special Agent in charge. And I'm Dr. Alira Thorne, the woman added, Senior Federal Prosecutor. The words landed differently here, not like before, because inside the station, they couldn't just be dismissed as roadside bluffing. Krell stepped in quickly, cutting off the moment. They're lying. It's a tactic. Happens all the time. Then verify it. Alira said immediately, You have the badges. You have the IDs. Call it in. Krell's jaw tightened. I don't need to call anything, he snapped. We verify on our timeline. Your timeline just expired, Adrian said calmly. That calm again. It was starting to crack something inside Krell. Enough, he barked. Book them. Rennick didn't move immediately. He looked at the badges Krell had dropped on the counter earlier. He picked one up, turning it in his hand. The weight of it was unmistakable. The detail, the craftsmanship. This wasn't cheap. This wasn't fake. You run the number? Rennick asked without looking up. It's fake, Krell repeated. That's not what I asked. A pause. Small, but dangerous. I didn't need to, Krell said finally. Rennick slowly removed his glasses. That's a problem, he said. Before Krell could respond, the door to the station swung open. Hard. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Everyone turned. Chief Marcellus Dre entered with the kind of presence that immediately shifted control. Older, sharper, the kind of man who didn't waste time on noise. His eyes scanned the room once, taking everything in, the cuffs, the badges, Krell's posture. What is this? Dre asked. Big arrest, Krell said quickly. Drug runners. Fake feds. Dre didn't respond right away. He walked to the counter, picked up one of the badges, and examined it closely, his thumb tracing engraving, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had seen fakes before. This wasn't one. He looked up. Who are you? He asked Adrian directly. Special Agent Adrian Vale, he repeated. And if you don't remove these cuffs immediately, Chief, this becomes something you can't contain. Silence. Real silence this time. Krell felt it. The shift. The moment where control started slipping. Not loudly, not dramatically, but inevitably. He's bluffing, Krell insisted, but his voice had changed. There was strain there now, cracks forming. Dre didn't look at him. "Run the number," he said to Rennick. "I tried earlier," Rennick replied. "System's lagging." Dre turned toward the phone on the wall. He stared at it for a second, then back at Krell. "You didn't call it in," he said. "It wasn't a question." "No, sir," Krell replied. Another pause, longer this time, heavier. Then Adrian spoke again. "We weren't passing through," he said. "We were here on assignment." Dre's eyes narrowed. "Assignment?" Alira stepped forward slightly, despite the cuffs. "We're part of an ongoing federal investigation into financial misconduct, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations tied directly to this county." The words landed like a hammer. Krell's stomach dropped. "No," he said under his breath. "That's not. You were not the beginning of this," Adrian continued. "But you just made yourself the center of it." Rennick stopped typing. Sykes, who had just entered behind them, went completely still. Even the air felt different. Dre looked at Krell now, really looked at him, and for the first time in 20 years, Halver Krell didn't look like the man in control. The sound hit first, low, mechanical, and growing fast. Not the scattered chaos of local sirens, but something coordinated, precise. Through the station windows, shadows moved, vehicles pulling in hard, doors opening in sync. The air inside tightened instantly, like the building itself understood what was coming. "Open the gate." A voice boomed from outside, amplified, controlled. "Federal agents. Open it now." No one moved at first. Then Sergeant Rennick rushed to the control panel and hit the switch. The metal barrier rolled up with a grinding noise that felt far too loud for the moment. Sunlight flooded in, and with it, silhouettes. They moved in formation. 6 figures in tactical gear stepped through the entrance, rifles angled but ready, movements clean and disciplined. No hesitation, no confusion, just purpose. Behind them, more followed, plainclothes, suits, state officers. The room filled quickly, efficiently, like a system locking into place. "Hands visible," one of the tactical agents commanded. Every officer in the room complied, except one. Halver Krell stood frozen, his mind struggling to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something far bigger than him. Adrian Vale stepped forward calmly, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the last remnants of the cuffs. "We're secure," he said. "No injuries." A woman in a sharp gray suit entered behind the tactical team, her presence cutting through the room instantly. Assistant Director Celine Arkwright. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned once, took everything in, and landed on Chief Dre. "Who's in charge here?" she asked. Dre stepped forward slowly. "I am. For now," she replied. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Adrian gestured slightly toward Krell. "That's him." Every head turned. Krell felt it. The shift, the spotlight snapping directly onto him. The same kind of attention he used to thrive on. Only this time, it wasn't admiration. It was judgment. Alira Thorne stepped beside Adrian, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Deputy Halver Krell initiated an unlawful stop, escalated without cause, conducted an illegal search, and detained federal personnel at gunpoint. Each word landed like a charge being read. Additionally, she continued, he attempted to fabricate probable cause, issued threats of unlawful search procedures, and interfere with an active federal operation. The room felt smaller. Krell opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. When it did, it sounded weak, even to him. "They looked suspicious," he said. No one reacted. No one argued, because it didn't matter. Arkwright gave a small nod. "Detain him." 2 agents moved instantly. Krell stepped back, instinct kicking in too late. "Wait! Hold on, this is a mistake." They didn't slow down. His arms were pulled behind his back, harder than necessary, his stance forced wide. The exact same position he had put Adrian in less than an hour ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Watch the shoulder." Krell snapped reflexively, wincing as the restraints tightened. No one adjusted. No one cared. "You have the right to remain silent," one of the agents began, voice flat, practiced. "Anything you say can be used against you, in a court of law. I was doing my job. Krell interrupted, louder now, desperate. They didn't identify themselves. They didn't need to, Adrian said calmly. Krell turned toward him, anger flashing again, but it didn't carry the same weight anymore. It felt hollow. You set me up, Krell said. Adrian shook his head slightly. No, you revealed yourself. That hit harder than anything else, because deep down, Krell knew it was true. He wasn't trapped. He wasn't framed. He was exposed. As they pulled him toward the exit, the outside scene came into focus. Media vans, cameras already rolling, reporters shouting questions into chaos. The story had arrived before the dust even settled. Krell blinked against the light, his mind scrambling for something. Anything that would make sense of this. But there was nothing left to grab onto. Inside the station, everything shifted quickly. Computers were being accessed, files boxed, officers separated and questioned. The place that had once been Krell's domain was now just another scene, another case file. Chief Dre stood off to the side, silent, watching it all unfold, not intervening, not defending, because there was nothing to defend. Elira retrieved her badge from the counter, clipping it back into place with a quiet sense of finality. Adrian picked up his phone, checking messages briefly before sliding it into his pocket. We're not done here, he said. Arkwright nodded. We never are. Krell, now in the back of a federal transport vehicle, sat hunched forward, wrists bound, staring at the metal floor. The noise outside blurred together, voices, engines, radio chatter, but none of it felt real. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. He had spent years believing he understood the system, believing he knew where the lines were, and how far he could push them. But he had miscalculated one thing, who he was pushing against. Back inside, Adrian approached two officers standing near the wall, Sykes and Pike. Both looked shaken, caught somewhere between relief and dread. You're not our target, Adrian said evenly, but you were present. Sykes nodded slowly, his voice low. I didn't know. You should have, Elira replied. The words weren't cruel, just honest. Pike swallowed. What happens now? Adrian held his gaze for a moment. That depends on how much you're willing to say. He handed Sykes a card. Everything, he added, from the beginning, because what had started as a roadside stop wasn't just about one officer anymore. It was a thread, and now that thread had been pulled, the entire structure behind it was starting to come apart. Outside, the convoy began to move. Krell sat in silence as the vehicle pulled away, the station shrinking behind him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control of where he was going, and for the first time ever, he understood something with absolute clarity. There was no talking his way out of this, no bending the rules, no rewriting the narrative, because this wasn't a situation he could dominate. This was a system far bigger than him, and it was already closing in. The courtroom felt colder than it should have, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the atmosphere, tight, heavy, final. Halvor Krell sat at the defense table in a standard-issue suit that didn't quite fit, his hands folded too tightly in front of him, knuckles pale. The badge that once defined him was gone. The authority he used to wield so casually had evaporated. All that remained was a man waiting to hear how the rest of his life would be measured. Across the room, Adrian Vale and Elira Thorne sat quietly among the federal team. They weren't speaking. They didn't need to. Their presence alone carried weight, not as victims, but as witnesses to something larger, something systemic. The case had moved fast, faster than Krell ever imagined possible. The dashcam footage had surfaced within days. Clean, intact, undeniable. Every word he had spoken, every escalation, every decision, played back over and over again, not just in court, but across the country. News outlets dissected it frame by frame. Commentators debated it. The public judged it. And the judgment had already been delivered long before the court ever convened. All rise. The judge entered, measured, composed, precise. The kind of presence that didn't tolerate noise or excuses. The room stood, then settled again into silence. Krell's attorney leaned toward him briefly, whispering something about procedure, about staying calm. It barely registered. Krell's focus drifted instead to the prosecution table, where stacks of evidence sat neatly organized, evidence he had created himself. "Mr. Krell," the judge began, voice steady, "you are charged with multiple violations, including unlawful detention, abuse of authority, obstruction of a federal investigation, and civil rights infringements. Do you understand the charges?" Krell swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Proceed." The prosecution didn't rush. They didn't need to. The first piece of evidence was the footage. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, the roadside stop. The heat, the glare, the tension. Krell watched himself step out of the cruiser, watched his posture, his tone, his movements. It was like looking at a stranger. But it wasn't. It was him. Every word echoed in the courtroom, sharper now, more deliberate, stripped of context, and left to stand on its own. License and registration. "I smell narcotics. Get out of the vehicle." Each statement, once routine in his mind, now sounded different, aggressive, unjustified, escalating. The moment with the firearm played next. "Gun!" The shout rang louder than before. Then the pause. Then Adrian's voice, calm, controlled, unmistakably composed. "Lower your weapon." The contrast was brutal. The prosecution didn't need commentary. The footage spoke. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom lingered longer than expected. Then came testimony. Officer Sykes took the stand first. He looked uncomfortable, shifting slightly as he spoke, but his voice held. "He told us they were armed suspects," Sykes said. "We followed procedure based on what we were told." "Did you verify the identification provided?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Sykes admitted. "We relied on Deputy Krell's judgment." And in hindsight, Sykes hesitated. Then it was a mistake. Simple, direct, damaging. Next came Alira. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She simply laid out the facts, one by one, each statement precise and grounded in law. "There was no probable cause," she said. "No observable violation. The escalation was immediate and unwarranted." She detailed the search, the detention, the refusal to verify credentials. Each point connected cleanly to the next, forming a chain that was impossible to break. Adrian followed. His testimony was even shorter. He had multiple opportunities to de-escalate, he said. He chose not to. That was it. No anger, no embellishment, just truth. By the time the defense stood, the outcome already felt inevitable. They argued misinterpretation, claimed stress, suggested procedural confusion, but it didn't hold because the evidence wasn't ambiguous. It was clear, and clarity leaves very little room for doubt. The verdict came quickly, guilty on all counts. The word echoed to the room, final and irreversible. Krell didn't react at first. He just sat there, staring ahead, as if the sound hadn't fully reached him yet. Then sentencing. The judge adjusted her glasses slightly, looking directly at him. "You were entrusted with authority," she said, "and you chose to misuse it, not once, but repeatedly, in a manner that undermines public trust and violates fundamental rights." Each word landed heavier than the last. "This court finds that your actions were not the result of confusion, but of deliberate disregard for the law you were sworn to uphold." A pause. Then, "You are hereby sentenced to 22 years in federal custody." No noise, no outburst, just a quiet, definitive end. Krell closed his eyes briefly. 22 years. The number settled in slowly, too large to grasp all at once. Across the room, Adrian stood, adjusting his jacket. Alira gathered her notes. Calm as ever, there was no celebration, no visible satisfaction, because this wasn't a victory. It was a correction. Outside, cameras waited again. Microphones, questions, headlines already forming. But inside, it was over. Krell was escorted out through a side door, wrists restrained once more. The hallway beyond felt narrower than it should have, the air heavier. Every step echoed, not with authority, but with consequence. As the doors closed behind him, the courtroom returned to stillness. Another case concluded, another record filed. And somewhere, far from the noise of cameras and courtrooms, the road stretched on unchanged and different. Cars would pass, drivers would move on, and the lesson would remain quiet but permanent. Power, unchecked, doesn't protect you. It exposes you, and once exposed, there's no turning back.